Hey there, it's Shauna. I hope you're doing great. So this video is in response to a comment that I got, a question on on this week's video actually. And so she asked the question, I said I would answer it, and so here it is. Maybe it's something that you've wondered about as well. So this is from this week's video, and this is Tracy that left a comment. She said, I'm a bit confused with degrees. Could you please do a video on the future about that, trying to expand my astrology skills? And so I said, sure. Do you mean the degrees of the full moon? Because in this video I mentioned that the full moon in Libra is happening at 10 degrees of Libra. And she said, yeah, I think in general, I always hear degrees mentioned with all the planets, but I'm unclear of the significance. Thank you. So Tracy and anyone else, if you listen to my videos, or if you ever read your horoscope or listen to other videos, you may have noticed that sometimes we'll say that like Mars is at 10 degrees of Leo, or the Sun is at 15 degrees of Pisces, or anything like that. What does that mean? So what I want to share with you is what you need to know about the degrees. This is by no means an exhaustive explanation of degrees from an astrological view. What I want to share with you right now is what you need to know as an astrology enthusiast, and how you can take, when you hear that, either in your horoscope, or maybe even if your astrologer says it, or you watch one of my videos, you know what to do with that information and how to apply it at a personal level. Degrees are basically like a marker for where the planets are, or where a point is within the astrology. So it kind of just helps us know where things are. It's like a marking point, like kind of like a flag. You could think of it as how we have like latitude and longitude. Like those are, we can say, okay, at this particular point, this is where something is located. And so I'll give you a visual also. So I'm working on the 2019 Moon Journal, and this is a chart of the new moon for February next year. So when I'm talking about the new moon, so we know it's a new moon here because the sun and the moon are together, and then that number 15. There's lots of other numbers on here, but for right now, look at 15. So in that case, I would say that this new moon is at 15 degrees of Aquarius in this case, because it's 15. And so that's where I get that number from. And so that number is basically a marker. It's saying, okay, within this whole entire pie of astrology and planets, the point that I'm talking about is right here. And so again, there's a whole other, like there's so much more that could be said about that, but for you, that's what I want you to know, that it's basically saying, okay, this is where the thing is that we're talking about, in this case, the moon. And what that means for you is that the reason why astrologers give the degrees is because what you want to do is know if that degree, so for example, this 15 degrees in Aquarius, how does that relate to you? How does that relate to your personal astrological birth chart? And so what you can do is, if you happen to know your chart, or if you happen to know even just your sun or your moon, what the sign is in, or maybe you even know what the degree is in, you can say, oh, that applies to me, and that becomes more personal to me because I have a connection there. So to give another example, using this 15 degrees in this chart. So let's say I know that this new moon is at 15 degrees. And then if I, as an astrologer, am looking at someone's chart and they have, let's say, their Venus at 15 degrees of Aquarius, or they have their Venus somewhere in that ballpark, like 10 to 20 degrees, that's something that I would look at as being more personal for that person, because this activity here is having a direct connection to them. It's like, you can think of it as like a thread moves from the point, like the moon or whatever transit it is that we're talking about. There's like a thread that moves from that point to the person. And so this can get very technical very fast, and it can get very overwhelming very quickly. which is why I don't mention degrees very often. I'll mention it with the lunar cycles when there's a full moon or a new moon. I like to mention the degrees because some of you like to know, and it's like it's something short and concise that you can look at. And if you're interested and you want to know more about this, let me know. I'm happy to talk about it more. But I think the biggest thing for you to know is to know if there's a transit that you're going through right now, if there's a situation that you're going through right now. It can be helpful to know which area of your life that is that represents that in your life. So for example, if you're really working through a career transition right now, you're going to want to pay attention to the area of your chart that involves your 10th house, which is about career. If you're really focused on your love life right now and you're either working on finding someone new or you're working through a challenge with an existing partner, you're probably going to want to pay attention to your 7th house, and because that represents relationships, etc. And so you can link that with the degrees, because if you know what's happening in the astrology, you know your personal makeup as far as that area of life, then you can connect the dots and you can see which transits are going to affect you more so than others. Again, this can get really technical really quickly. That's why I stick with just the lunar cycles. And so I think the most helpful thing is, if you are an astrology enthusiast and you like my videos, you like reading your horoscope, but to be honest, I wouldn't even worry about the degrees. If it's something where you want to study astrology, then yeah, I would start learning about it a little bit more. But I think the biggest thing is just to pay attention to the significance of the planets aspecting each other. That's the meat of what I talk about in my videos is, you know, like the fact that we have Mars and Saturn coming together soon. That has a certain influence, and I think that the combination of the planets coming together and those like personalities of the planets coming together, that has so much more influence than the degrees. And I think that it can be helpful to look at degrees when you're actually looking at your chart and you're maybe doing an analysis for yourself, or your astrologer is doing that for you and you can understand it that way. But I think, again, that it gets kind of technical, and what I want for you is I want it to be easy. I want it to be as easy as possible so that you don't have to know all of the things about astrology. Like, that's my job, that's your astrologer's job. Like anyone that is reading your chart, that's for them to do, so that you don't have to worry about learning all of that stuff. You know, you just get the recommendations and then you go and live your life and be happy. So in summary, the degrees are really just a marker, and it helps us identify where the particular planet is, and then how that links or doesn't link to you and your personal astrology. And for the purposes of everyday life, I wouldn't worry about the degrees all that much. I would focus more on the planetary combinations. And lastly, if you do want to know more, let me know. If you want to know more about something, anything about astrology or something that I talk about on my videos, feel free to leave a comment. I definitely like to make videos in response to things that you have questions about, so feel free to ask. Until next time, I will see you soon. Sending you lots of love, and have a great week. Bye.